Hey, it's Dan, and welcome to Unified Gaming. So in this one, I want to share with you the Bowgank. This is hands down the best sniper you will find out there. It hits like a truck, it can move really fast if you wish, and it's got awesome sustain. I've also done a few things to make it really tanky and hard to bring down, so again, it just covers all bases. You'll notice on my skill bar already that I have a few scribed skills which I'll go through, but this does work without scribing, so don't panic. And as for gameplay you ask, I will be posting lots of gameplay in Cyrodiil, Battlegrounds, IC etc. on the channel, so I suggest that you do subscribe to stay up to date with that. And please note that this is an updated version from the previous video, so if you have seen that, please pay close attention because things are quite different here. I want to say a massive thanks as well to everyone at Patreon who helps support. If you want to support and get early access, there are details down below. So for this, what are we doing? Race wise, you have two choices in all honesty. You can choose to be a Khajiit or a Dark Elf. If you are a Khajiit, you get access to essentially bonus crit damage. This means your burst is really high when you crit. The downside is that your damage could be a little inconsistent, so Dark Elf is a really good option as well. As with being a Dark Elf, you do get flame resist that does offset being a vampire. For me personally, I go to Khajiit because I also play this as a melee build from time to time, and that extra reduction from being detected and stealth is quite noticeable, but Dark Elf, Khajiit, both really good options. Khajiit is my kind of go-to, but Dark Elf works really, really well as well. The other advantage of being a Khajiit is you do get a bit of sustain and a bit of max resource, so it's kind of an all-round race, but Dark Elf is like the second choice. If you aren't either a Dark Elf or a Khajiit, an Orc or High Elf would also work, and a Wood Elf is, you do lose damage in all honesty on a Wood Elf, so you can't really pick that up any way. For the attributes, I have 16 in Magicka, 16 in Stamina, and 32 in Health. You might notice that our recoveries are a bit low, but when I touch upon the skills, you'll see that's completely fine because we can just abuse some skills to get crazy sustain. That said, if you want to change the food, we can do that, and I'll show you how to get a bit more sustain if you want some better base sustain. And also note that their health is just under 30,000, which is a really good sweet spot, and you could push this higher with a few triglyphs. Our damage is also unbuffed, so this goes higher and higher still, which is awesome. And for the Mundus stone, we are using the Lover. The Lover I found is the most consistent damage Mundus there is. You could use the Shadow, which gives you more crit damage, but because you don't always crit on every single hit, you actually end up with peaks and troughs, whereas the Lover just averages it out, and in most instances is better. So for my recommendation, always go with the Lover, it just covers all bases. If you go in no CP Battlegrounds, the Shadow can perform better in some matches, so the Lover is just the easy one to leave on in my opinion. As for the consumables, I use kind of a mix. So if you want to go max damage and stay alive, Pack Leader's Broth. This will give you loads of health and loads of stamina. This is the best damage one you'll get. The issue with this is that you do lack base sustain, so you might find it a bit hard to sustain without using skills well. So if you do find that a bit hard, you could sacrifice a bit of the health and a bit of the stamina and go with something like Bear Haunch. It will give you less stamina, but you do get stamina recovery. So with Smoked Bear Haunch, what you have instead is 1400 stamina recovery. When we put on our damage buff, it goes up to 1500 base. Our max stamina is only 20,000 though, so our damage does drop a little bit. However, you do get more sustain, and you get more Magicka recovery, which is a key here, that really helps. And the cheaper version is Jewels of Misrule. So damage, Pack Leader's Broth, essentially max stamina, max health is max damage, or you want to go with health and just recoveries. Jewels of Misrule is what I like to use in Battlegrounds, and Pack Leaders in Cyrodiil, just because you got a bit more sustain from CP. And potion wise, I use Tri-Stat potions. These are they're my favourite. They cover everything. It's health, Magicka, stamina. If something goes wrong, you use one of these and you're good to go. You could also use double dot poisons if you wish, but you could glyph it up as well, which I'll touch upon in a moment. As for the skills, I want to show you what I use currently, and then what you would use if you don't have Scribing, and I'll touch upon the Scribe skills properly at the end of the video, so do sort of stay for that. In order to maximise this, we are using the following. We have Lethal Arrow. This applies minor defile, and when it's fully buffed, it's like 14,000 tooltip, and if you are Dark Elf, it's 15,000. It is really, really high. We then have Silver Bolts. Now, Lethal Arrow gives them the poison status effect, so it's the damage over time, that's an execute, which is nice. You also get the minor defile, which reduces their healing. That's really important. We then have Silver Bolts, which is a physical skill, and I don't morph this. So in the fighter skills, you have a option down here to morph Silver Bolts into Silver Shards. The damage is less because this is considered an AoE skill now, not a single target, and our CP buffs single target. So if you play in no CP Battlegrounds only, Silver Shards is better. If you play in Cyrodiil, then use Silver Bolts, the base skill, because it will hit harder. And that's only because the CP is buffing it. Our next skill we have is a scribe skill called Dazing Soul. This is a really interesting skill to add and sort of do pay close attention. It's a stun. So when we use the skill, it will stun people and does a little bit of damage, but it applies major defile, which is really noticeable. We also get access to a dot, which you could use the Oblivion version. It's 450 damage against a 30,000 health target, up to 900. And you could obviously go with the Lingering Torment, which I'll touch on later, which is a cheaper version. Doesn't need soul gems. But what this is here for is that ranged stun. As a sniper, you don't have a ranged stun, and that really, really hurts. So having this now means we've got a ranged stun that's 28 meters. We can stun people really, really far away. So I would recommend using this one personally. If you don't have access to Scribing, then you could go down and get Magnum Shot, but you are much closer, it's 22 meters. And in my opinion, I wouldn't have the stun then, I'd just drop the stun and I'd go down to Assault and use Vigor. Vigor will give you a heal over time and an armor buff. We get this elsewhere, but this is what I'd use instead of Dazing Soul. We then have Shadowy Disguise, which is our cloak, and we use Merciless Resolve. Merciless Resolve charges our stacks, and when we get them fully stacked, we get loads and loads and loads of damage. It also gives us a really big hit if we wish. So this is almost 21,000 fully buffed. It's stupidly high. So this is a really, really good skill to have. If you want to change the ultimate to use Toxic Barrage, that is completely fine. So if you go to the bow skill and Toxic Barrage, you'll get a really, really nasty just ult at range. It's absolutely disgusting. It's almost a kill guaranteed. It's so much damage, especially with the stun in the build now. So stun and into Toxic Barrage is just like a death sentence. Really, really, really strong skill. Me personally though, I actually quite like incap, because when I'm playing offensive, I can kill people at range, and if I don't have the damage and they try to counter me because they roll dodge or something, I can then go with an incap interspec bow, and that will often kill people or give me enough time to escape. So incap Silver Bolts or incap spec bow will get somebody off you really fast because it's so much burst damage. So I prefer incap for that reason. Please note that if you do use the Toxic Barrage version, you will need to go and make sure that you keep the Merciless Resolve on, because you need that Hemorrhage passive. It's a 10% crit boost, as long as you have one of these skills slotted. And if for some reason you wanted to put Merciless Resolve on the back bar and not actually use it just as a damage buff, you could even slot the Fighter's Guild, Camo Hunter, and that will give you slightly more damage. However, you do need to put this on the back bar, because this is a passive damage boost as well, and you need to keep incap at this point. For me personally, I think it's easier just to use this. It's more easier to play. It's just as good. For the back bar, we have Siphoning Attacks. This is a sustained skill. It is ridiculously good. When you cast this, you use your health, and you turn it into Magicka and Stamina. Now, it costs 4,000 health, but you get 2,600 Magicka and Stamina. This is, if you did this every second, it is 5,200 recovery. It is so much sustain, it's actually stupid. And then you can offset this by just using some heals in between. So what I often do is when I'm sneaking around, I cast this, and what's really nice with this skill is you can't kill yourself with it. So when your health is too low, you can't cast it. So that's really, really good. Just factor in that if you have dots on you and stuff, or Haunting Curse, then that might get you when you're really low health. So just please be careful with this. But this is 100% worth it. It's so much sustain. We then have a Burst Heal. Now this Burst Heal is a bit unusual. It's a Scribe skill, and it's all for its contingency, which we've put into healing contingency. When we heal ourselves, it's an AoE heal around you. It's 8 meters. It doesn't show this, but it's 8 meters. And it increases our damage done by 2,000 within the next 7 seconds. So our next damage will hit harder, and you can proc this in stealth. So it's a passive damage boost, and it's our Burst Heal, and it gives us minor resolve, which means we don't need Vigor. So this is really, really good. When you cast this, it pulls you out of stealth, But if you're in sneak and you trigger it, so if I cast cloak, it will trigger, but it won't pull me out of sneak, which is really, really nice. So I can cast this like well before the fight. And the normal buffer sequence would be race against time, rally, contingency, and then you find your target, cloak into your combo. Like so. And this will work really, really nice. The tooltip for heal wise, it's very similar to Healthy Offering. Healthy Offering is 12,800, so almost 13,000, but you lose 1,000 health, so it's 12,000 or 11,800 roughly. This is 10,000 fully buffed, so if you put it on, you'll see it's 9,900, it's like the same. So you lose about 2,000 tooltip health, which isn't a lot. However, you do get access to this free damage buff down here. So this is more for damage. I would prefer running this if I was you. It's also cheaper. If you don't have that though, then use Healthy Offering, as this will just give you the burst heal that you need. So those are the ways around it. Me personally, as I've showed, I would use the healing contingency. I think it's a better skill for what we do. It gives us the armor buff, it gives us a damage boost, which is what we want. And we should be killing people before they kill us. So that's why we can sacrifice a bit of healing power. On the back bar, we then run Concealed Weapon. This is here because it gives us a minor expedition buff, so it's 15% movement speed. Really nice. You don't do anything with it, it's just a free speed boost. Race Against Time is minor force, so more crit damage, and major expedition, so more movement speed. Plus it's snare immunity, so this is really helpful. And then Rally is our damage buff, it's also a burst heal, and it's also a sustain buff. This is really good, and you can use this in sneak. So by the time you have this, before you buff up and you go into combat, if you make a mistake, this will heal you anyway and get you out of trouble, or you can just go with the burst heal. One thing to note with that burst heal though is that when you cast it, and you move out, it doesn't heal you straight away, so you have to like roll dodge to get the heal, or you cast it twice. So it casts on the second action. So what I would normally do is just cast it and roll dodge like this, and still get the heal. So it plays exactly the same as I would normally. Or you could go between cast that and then go for rally, and then you get the heal as well and put on the buff. So it doesn't play any different in all honesty, but it's just something to note with that skill. For the ultimate, you have Temporal Guard, which is minor protection. If you want, you could go down and use Soul Tether instead as an oh no button. It's an AoE, it heals you, it stuns people, it's pretty good. So a Temporal Guard is just free damage reduction though, so I would go with that. But that's the skills. One thing to note as well is we are a vampire, and we are a vampire stage 3 for undeath. We also get Dark Stalker, which lets us move around without being slowed, so really helpful. And on top of that, you also get Strike from the shadows. A bonus damage buff when you come out of sneak or invis. So you see our damage is 5,600, it's pretty high. The next thing I want to go through is the CP, and then I'll go through the sets. For the champion points, it's pretty simple. We have Fighting Finesse, more crit damage, Master at Arms, more damage, Deadly Aim, more damage, Backstabber, more damage. You will note that lots of our damage comes from flanking, so attacking from behind to get that bonus crit damage and those bonus damage boosts that the Nightblade has. Lots of it are from flanking, so this is really important. If for some reason you don't flank well, you could swap Backstabber and use any skill you want. Weapons Expert. Me personally, I'd go with something like Wrathful Strikes, it buffs all of your damage, but Backstabber is more damage. For the red ones, you have Bastion, if you want to fight against Sorcerers. If you don't want to use this, you could then swap this for Sustain by Suffering, which gives us more stam recovery and stuff. And then you'd use Pain's Refuge, Survival Instincts, and Celerity. Bastion, as I said, is that flex spot. It just means you do more damage to Sulks and to shielded people. And you could swap this for Sustain by Suffering, or swap one of these out for Sustain by Suffering. And for the green ones, we have Steed's Blessing and Sustain in Shadows. Movement speed, and it makes us cheaper to sneak, so they're really good. Talking of sneak reduction, one thing that is worth getting if you haven't already is the Legerdemain, and focus on improved hiding. This is really, really helpful. This with that CP means you can sneak for pretty much free. It is so cheap to sneak around. And when you are sneaking, your stam doesn't regen, but you could use the Siphoning Strikes just to fix your stam. So there are ways around it. The final thing now to go through is the sets, and then I'll touch upon the scribe skills fully and show you the different variations you can add. For the sets, we are using Way of the Fire. Way of the Fire is, it's just amazing. It's such a good set. Every 2 seconds, you do bonus damage, and this can crit. So when you come out of stealth, this crits, which means this is hitting people for like 3,000-4,000. It hits people really hard. You could then use double dot poisons if you wish, or go for a glyph. For the trait on the Way of the Fire, we used a sharpened bow because this is better. And if you wanted to use poisons for more pressure when they're low health, this can help. Alternatively, you could go with a glyph, and then the glyphs that I would recommend is to go and use essentially a decreased health, which is oblivion damage, or you could go with a shock glyph. Now the reason we use these is because we've got minor defile from snipe and major defile from our stun, so we don't need disease. The shock can proc minor vulnerability, which is more damage done, or the oblivion is just more burst damage. For me personally, I'll go with this. You might also notice this part is recorded on the PTS just to show you everything gold, best in slot gear, but I would only go with gold weapons and purple everything else. Me personally, I prefer double dot poisons. I find that more useful, but you could obviously change it. For the back bar, we had the Vatashan Greatsword, basically anything of choice, but this is just more damage. If you can get this, it is more damage, and it doesn't need to be perfected. It could be a maul, it could be an axe, but the Vate 2H is really good. The Frenzied Momentum set. When you cast Momentum, which is our damage buff and we're in combat, skills will charge it up and we get free damage. That's literally it. I then use one piece penetration, so Valken Scoria or Krog. That gives us more pen. We have full divines and everything. And you've got Way of the Fire, chest, Tarnish Nightmare is the second set. We have Tarnish on the shoulder, the waist, the hands, the legs, and the boots. I've gone with stamina on all of these and just health on the chest because it comes in health, but you could change this to stamina. Or you could go with Triglyph on the head, the chest, and the legs, and stamina on the rest. All divines to maximise that damage. And then for the jewellery, we have Fire, Neck and Ring of Marken. Marken will give you the most damage out of stealth because it gives us just this nice 200 boost, plus you get more armour. So when you actually combine these together, you do have a pretty good amount of armour. So back bar, we have 17,000 resistances before buffs. And then if we put on our contingency, which is our minor resolve, so there's our armor buff, and I'll just proc my major armor buff. You'll see our resistance is 26,000, so we have a good amount of armor on this build, and that's mainly because of Marken. So Marken's really good. In the previous version, I was using Wild Hunt. I personally prefer the speed. If you want to maximise damage, you go a bit slower. This is more damage. However, I found the time to kill people was not that much faster. In most instances, I had to use the same number of skills anyway. So I would personally keep Marken, but instead of going for infused damage on the jewellery, I would go with 2 Swift. And I'd recommend putting your Fire as Swift, because you're more likely to use an infused Marken elsewhere. If you did this, the difference between Marken infused and so 2 Swift first 3 Swift Wild Hunt is that actually the Wild Hunt 3 infused is only 11 weapon damage higher than using 2 Swift Marken. What it means basically is Marken is just free armor. That in this situation, if you're going to run Wild Hunt, you're better running Marken with 2 Swift because you get 14% movement speed, so you only lose 1%, but you get 2,000 armor, which is a lot better. And the damage is the same. So I would suggest trying this option. This is like my favourite version of this. But if you want to maximise that damage, 3 infused will work really well. The final thing then is to really touch upon the scribe skills and how they all work. Please note that in order to get the scribe stuff, you do need to own Gold Road, and you need to have access to the Scholarium in Nevaeh. The Scholarium is a new region added in Gold Road, and it does take a while to get the scripts that you need. However, as you saw with the sets and the skills and stuff, it complements each other really well. So this is probably my, what I would recommend. If you can get this, do get it. But if you can't, use the skills I showed already, like Vigor, healthy offering instead. When you are here, the best scribe skills in my opinion for this is going down to Wield Soul, we use the Stun, Anknock's Cruelty, or Lingering Torment. The Cruelty is more damage, the Torment can be applied to any target. So this is good for like if you hit lots of people really fast and you're not particularly aiming one target. This is really good for trying to burst one person. The DPS between the two are very similar, with the Cruelty edging out. If you want more sustain though, the Resurgence is a nice sustain buff. And you could use Defile or Major Breach. If you use Major Breach, you will get more just damage on your combo. Defile means it's hard for people to survive. So I prefer the Defile because it means when people are low, I have a better chance of killing them, but the Breach is more burst. So these are the options there. Everything else, in all honesty, isn't really worth it in my opinion. And then for the contingency, we use this instead of our burst heal. So we have healing, Warrior's Opportunity, which applies 2,000 damage to our next hit, and our Minor Resolve, which is basically a substitute Vigor with a damage boost. It's slightly less burst than a burst heal, but the bonus damage is nice, and that Resolve lasts 22 seconds, so this is a really good skill. If you didn't want to run this, you could also run it as a damage mitigation and run Gladiator's Tenacity, get an 8% damage reduction. This is also a really good option. The class mastery isn't worth it because you do have to go and get this, which takes ages and it doesn't do enough. As for everything else on here, it doesn't do anything good enough, so this is the only use. And beyond that, all the other skills in my opinion don't really do anything good enough. The only honourable mention is the Vault skill. It's a fun skill, and this is basically Streak but backwards. I'll show you this in a moment. You want to use Immobilize, Hunter's Snare, and Evasion. When you set this up, you have to be on the bow bar, and this is basically a getaway button. So you'll drop the Daze and Soul, because I don't want to stun them, I just want to be able to escape if I need to. If someone tries to kill you, you push it and you streak back. You can cast it twice and go into Cloak. It's a really good getaway button. And each time you do this, you immobilize them and slow them down. And it means it's a really good way to get out of a area or out of a fight if you're going to die. The other advantage of this is that as you use this, it does a little bit of damage, but the snare lasts 5 seconds, so it's a good amount of snare. So if you only hit once, you can still move faster than they are because they are snared, and it's a snare on them, not on the area. Only thing to note is that if you spam this, it does get more and more expensive like Streak. So you can't spam this infinitely because that stamina cost will just get higher and higher and higher until you can't afford it. And it's like really expensive now. So there's 9,300 when it's fully like stacked. So you only use that as a oh no button. Me personally, however, I do prefer the Wield Soul. I think this is a better version, the Dazing Soul, because that stun is very, very potent. Snipe, into stun, into bow, Silverbolts hits really hard. But that's it guys, that's the build. I'd like to know what you think of it. If you've got any questions, let me in the comments down below or join my Discord. And if you want to stay up to date with the stuff, then subscribe. You'll see the gameplay that will come out very soon. And as always, I want to say a massive thanks to everyone at Patreon. If you want to support myself there and get early access and much more, there's details down below. Until then, I'll catch you in the next video, so thanks for watching. Take care, and bye!